Okay, well, oh, we have one more decided. Okay, well, I'll start the meeting now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Albany. This is the Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces Commission meeting for November of 2022. I guess we'll start with the call to order. We have a roll call.
Certainly. Commissioner Abbott?
Here.
Commissioner Armendariz?
Here.
Commissioner Chang Frank?
Here.
Commissioner Kent is excused. Don't see Commissioner Martin yet. Commissioner Price?
Here.
And Chair Beal.
Present. We do have a quorum, so we'll begin the meeting. Like all the meetings in the City of Albany.
Chair Beal, excuse me, I'm sorry, is your microphone on?
I'm hearing it fine on this.
You will. So, do we know if the recording was good? Okay, yeah. Usually, I don't need a microphone. If those of you who are familiar with the volume of my voice, I don't think it was on last time. I don't remember an echo like this. So, but anyway, we'll begin with the following land acknowledgement statement that shall begin reading. Since November 15, 2021. The City of Albany recognizes, which I'll say is almost a year ago today. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must take strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this our home, or their home. Okay, so approval of the minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion regarding the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes from October 13th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Armendariz?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang Frank?
Yes.
Commissioner Price?
Yes.
Chair Beal.
Yes, and the minutes are approved. And this is my favorite time of the evening, the public comment for persons desiring to address the advisory body on an item that is not on the agenda. So that would be, you can't talk about the street tree master plan or the subcommittee reports. The speaker's limited up to 3 minutes. And we're not allowed to take questions or any of that stuff, except the staff maybe take questions. So it looks like we have how does this work now? When is there anyone online? Do we always do the person in person first?
Yeah, it's your discretion. There are attendees, but no one has their hand up at this time.
Okay, great. So Jeremiah, take it away.
Yes, Chair Beal, and good evening, Commission. Good evening, Commission. Good to see everybody. So yeah, I got some notes here. I was wondering if it might be possible to put a drinking fountain on Albany Hill. I did talk to the fire department, and there is a water line that goes from the circle at the top where the fire hydrant is. There's a water line underneath the ground that does go so many hundred feet. They mentioned it does go to the end of the pathway where the circle is at the end, at the top of Albany Hill. So I think, to encourage public participation at the parks after hiking up that hill, it sure would be nice to get a nice drink of water. So I'll just suggest drinking fountain on Albany Hill. Also, the cleanliness of Memorial Park bathrooms and fixing the ADA buttons for the bathrooms to get those working. It's kind of not adequate right now. So I'm not sure if Public Works is responsible to clean the parks, but maybe we could have, some sort of city staff or some sort of Public Works personnel be assigned to the parks. That way, every day, part of the route is to go to each park and check on things to maybe make sure the ADA buttons are working, make sure the bathrooms are cleaned, things like that. Also, I just want to stress the point of community gardens. Community gardens are really important. It could be as easy as, for example, right now is the time to plant garlic. All you got to do is break open the bulbs, put it in the dirt, and come April, you got garlic with purple flowers. It's just they water themselves all through winter. So garlic is really easy to plant, so I just want to say community gardens. And if we can't do community gardens, maybe some raised beds, some sort of, raised garden bed. Also, the dog park at Memorial Park. I know there's been a lot of public interest in dividing up the dog park between having one side be for large dogs and having one side be for small dogs. And so I would suggest maybe putting, a small 3-foot high fence somewhere along the middle to divide the park up into some 2 spaces. That way, small dogs and large dogs have their own areas. And also, I just want to talk about the Ocean View lights after 10 p.m. A lot of the time, the lights for the softball field, it's on after 10 p.m. and there's neighbors that really don't appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Did anyone raise their hands online or no?
No.
Peggy's here. Okay, Peggy.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners and staff. I'm Peggy McQuaid, and as I wind down my term on the City Council, I want to take a minute of your time to thank each one of you for your service to our community. I know it's not always easy or convenient to attend a monthly meeting or to do the work necessary to prepare for these meetings. Meeting on Zoom for over 2 years has impacted all of us in ways both known and unknown. I'm extremely happy to be here tonight to be able to see you in person, and I'm very grateful for your perseverance and patience during this time. The Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission is in a unique position as an advisory body. You have the opportunity to impact everyone in Albany, from infants to seniors. You give us all smiles, and you make us feel good. The Park, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan 2022 was adopted by the City Council this year. And I want to say thank you to all of you for the work that you put in from the very beginning through the entire process to where it became a living document. PROS commissioners often make difficult decisions which directly impact our community. You have proven yourselves able to navigate these issues with grace and compassion, reaching responsible, although not always popular, decisions. So often, recreation is an afterthought, nice, but not really important to daily life. But we all know better than that, and we understand it's vital to the quality of life and critical to everyone's health, both mental and physical. This was clearly demonstrated during the shelter-in-place days of the pandemic and continues to be true today as we recover from the negative impacts of the pandemic. Thank you again for all of your work that you've put into PROS. I wish you every success in your future endeavors, and I hope that all of you continue to stay engaged and serving our Albany community. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Still no one at home? Okay. Now, sort of in between this and the announcements, I'm not sure which it applies to, but I wanted to just mention someone emailed today very late in the day about kids playing on the roof at Memorial. Does the staff have any comment on that, or did you have a chance to digest that, or was it an outstanding issue, or you don't know? Okay. Okay, so then on that note, let's move on to announcements. Any staff announcements? No? What? Don't you have Thanksgiving or something? Like, oh my gosh. Like you could tell us about the Christmas things. All right. Commissioners, do you have any announcements? Okay. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a quick meeting. I did just want to mention that there was appeal to one of our tree removals, which was denied. And you can see that on the video from the city council meeting. So I guess this means we're on to the street tree master.
Before we move on,
You have another announcement?
also at the city council meeting, there was the tree removal application, but there was also the update on our work plan. Does staff have any update on what the city council's feedback was on that?
Yeah.
No, not really. They discussed it, and I think they will be coming back with some recommendation for the next council to consider.
Okay, so yeah, that sounds about expected. That they probably wouldn't be in the mood for making a lot of. Well, anyway, so on with that, we're going to go on to discussion and possible actions on matters related to the following items. Item 6-1, street tree master plan. I can already assume we've got a staff report, so.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director for the city. I'm joined by my colleague, Natasha Colleton, who is a Civic Spark Fellow. I'll let Natasha introduce herself in a moment and tell you a little bit about the Civic Spark program if you are not already familiar with it. So we're going to share this presentation. I'm going to do a quick introduction, hand it over to Natasha, and we'll go back and forth a little bit just to keep things moving along. I wanted to just briefly set the context for the street tree master planning process that we're embarking on. And it's something that we've been talking about in some of our planning documents now for a few years. It first came up when we were preparing our general plan back in 2015, 2016 timeframe. There's a policy in there in the general plan to prepare a street tree master plan. Became an important part of our climate action plan adopted a few years later. And today it's part of this city council strategic plan. So building on that foundation of prioritization of this work, we're excited to begin to work on it. I will just mention, and will probably come up in various discussions that we're having, it's intended to really be a collaborative process that involves a variety of city departments, a variety of city commissions and committees, and a variety of stakeholders. It's something that we do in our department a lot. We're not necessarily arborists, but we are planners, and we're good at kind of managing the creation of a plan and bringing in people with expertise and interests and information and putting that together into something that then the city can use going forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Natasha, if I may, and have her give you a little bit of background about what we're doing and where we are so far.
Thank you, Jeff, and good evening, Commissioners. My name is Natasha Gallatin, and I am a Civic Spark Fellow for the City of Albany. And for those of you that may not be familiar with the Civic Spark program, it is an AmeriCorps program, and my fellowship is 11 months long, and I am primarily working on the project management of the Street Tree Master Plan and also focusing on doing waste and recycling compliance as well. But main mission of Civic Spark is to increase the capacity of local government. And so I am here today, and before my Civic Spark fellowship, I graduated from UC Berkeley. I studied environmental economics and policy and city planning. And from there, I really was interested in getting experience in local government and found myself here. So with that, I'll go ahead and continue with this presentation. So Jeff gave an overview of where the purpose and need for the Street Tree Master Plan came from. And we envision this project to be split up into two parts. The first phase will be the inventory, and the second phase will be the master planning. So let me go ahead and get into the details of the inventory. So as you may know, the first step in managing any urban forest is to understand what we're working with. So this inventory is expected to include not only information about the tree, so that would include the species, the size of the empty tree basins, and among other attributes, but also the location information. So we are using this inventory to find the conditions of the hardscape, any overhead utilities, and any other factors that might impact the growth of the tree, among other things. So this inventory is very critical, and we have selected, as you may know, Arbor Pro, who is an ISA certified urban forestry consulting firm. And so they have done over 100 different projects across California, primarily citywide street tree inventories. Notably, they completed a street tree inventory for the city and county of San Francisco in 2017. They also completed one for Cupertino in 2018. And more recently, they conducted a campus-wide campus-wide tree inventory for UC Berkeley, and it totaled to about 6,700, which is closer to the number of trees we're looking at Albany. And so here we have kind of a roadmap to the tasks we have at hand and see where we're going to be moving forward. So as you may know, in the recent council meeting, we were able to take the contract for Arbor Pro, and it was approved. And so our next steps is we will have the street tree inventory commence sometime in the winter, and following next year will also be when the outreach and significant stakeholder engagement will also commence. And during this period of time, we also anticipate a draft request for proposals for a qualified urban forestry consultant for the planning of the document itself. We anticipate bringing a draft to the Pros Commission, and when we receive the feedback, we will go ahead and bring it back to council and move that forward, and staff will eventually release that as well. The inventory itself is expected to be completed sometime in the spring, and that is around the time we also anticipate to select a consultant. And following in the summer is when the second phase will be fully underway, and throughout we will also be doing outreach, and yeah, we're gonna be learning along the way.
So one of the things that we like to do when we go out to seek proposals from consultants is kind of leave a blank canvas for them to make a presentation to us about how they would approach the study. Some situations, some cities approach this in a different way where they're very prescriptive and say, this is exactly what we want. We're doing just the opposite because we don't want them just to repeat back what we think we want. We want them to tell us what's their experience, what has been successful, what they know of Albany, what do they think would work, both in terms of the technical parts of the work, but also the engagement parts of it as well. So we're not going into this with a locked-in scope of work, but we do have some ideas of things that we think are going to be really important. And I think one of the fascinating things about this planning effort that we're starting in is the complexity of our urban environment and of our roadways that we're putting these street trees in. There's a lot going on. If you think about it, there's about up to maybe 8 pieces of infrastructure that connect from the street to every piece of property, every building in the city. Some of it's below ground, some of it's above ground. And so it's navigating that. We have to think about the different modes of transportation that use our roadways. And therefore, 3 or 4 different modes of transportation. We have to think about other things that are on the surface, like street lights, fire hydrants, trash cans, bike racks, driveways, street parking, so forth. So there's a lot of dimensions to this that are going to be really interesting, I think, to discuss. And we're hoping that the selected consultant will help us kind of create a framework where we can navigate all these constraints and opportunities to maximize both the aesthetic experience of Albany and adaptation to a changing climate and just kind of overall quality of life going into the future. So as shown on the slide here, taking into consideration the location where to put trees, and thinking through those placement decisions, we do know that there's a couple of work products that we want out of this. We probably, not probably, almost certainly want to update our municipal code where it's related to street trees. I can't remember when the code was last updated, but it's time to do that. So I think coming out of this effort would be a draft new ordinance to incorporate in the municipal code, and also a program guideline. So maybe a little bit more flexible, a little bit more detail-oriented about here's how we're going to implement this plan over 10, 15, 20 years. And that would talk about how many people do we need, how much money do we need, where do we prioritize our efforts, so on and so forth. The other part of this is the kind of the technical part about trees, the species mix, thinking about the conditions where trees are going to be successful and what we need to do to make sure the trees are going to be successful, whether it's the soil mass or irrigation or something like that. And then also, as you well know, there are issues and difficult decisions about when do trees when can trees be preserved and when should trees not be preserved, and hoping to update some framework for that decision making so that we're going into this. They're never going to be easy decisions, but hopefully we have a framework that everybody can agree with that makes sure that we're making the best possible decisions. So again, that's just kind of a rough idea of the kinds of things that we think would be useful, but we're really looking forward to the consultants responding to our request for proposals to lay that out in different ways. And we can pick with your input and with other public input, hey, that's the right person or the right forum or the right scope of work and approach, so we get the best plan we can. So I'm going to turn it back to Natasha for the final slide on next steps.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So as I had mentioned earlier with the roadmap and the timeline, our next steps is to bring a draft request for proposals to the Pros Commission. And once we solicit the appropriate feedback we're looking for and edit the RFP, we're going to go ahead and take it to council. And once that is approved, we will immediately release it. And we're anticipating on conducting a lot of outreach as well, and that'll primarily be in-house, but that'll also commence the new year. And the pros will be the primary advisory body for when we bring work documents for review, among other things. And yeah, I think that concludes the presentation, and I think it's time that we can turn it over to the questions.
Yeah, so commissioner questions and then public comment, is that correct? We won't have, there's no decision for us to make tonight, right? Okay. So, commissioners, Commissioner Mendries.
I'm curious about the community engagement and outreach, and what sorts of things are you planning for that?
No, that's a great question. I can go ahead.
Sure.
So currently in store, we're anticipating a couple of workshops, especially when it comes around to more of the policy work, and that'll be something that could be conducted in the advisory bodies or something that we will plan and put forth so that the community is aware of when these events will be. But at the moment, we currently have a rough idea of what kind of activities, but not definite.
We'll definitely have a web page. We've talked about setting up a dedicated web page where it's really easy to make comments. We've had some success with that in other contexts for people who can't make it to a meeting like this. To just have at key milestones an open comment section for 30 days or something like that.
So it sounds like it's not quite defined yet, and you do it when, Commissioner Jennifer.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. This is a great presentation, and thank you for all the work that you've already done, and that we're going to have input into the scope of work or the proposal, right? So I think even some of those public comment or the community outreach would be somewhat answered, right? If we're looking at the request for proposals I guess you could put it out there for the consultant to propose, but it's nicer to sort of say what you want, right? Wondering if other commissions or other committees like the Climate Action Committee are going to be involved in any of these other sort of working documents, or like what points will they be weighing in?
I think as much as we want to engage people as much as we can, respecting their own agenda and workloads. I would anticipate that at the beginning, somewhere in the middle when we start to see some draft work products coming out of the consultant, and then towards the end making a recommendation to the City Council at each of those 3 stages, we would check in with Climate Action Committee, certainly the Transportation Commission, because we're dealing with often the infrastructure that's used for, or right next to the infrastructure that's used for transportation, and then planning and zoning, since in a lot of cases things happen when new buildings come in, and there's a lot of linkages there too. So, one possibility that we could do is create some working groups that has pros and cons of 1 or 2 people from different committees, or we just make the rounds to the full committees in some sort of cycle, if you will.
Thanks.
To the left, Martin, or?
Yeah, I had several questions. Thank you for the presentation. Piggybacking on the questions about engagement, I don't see a particular need for engagement for the inventory, but is that part of what you're talking about, or is it really for the master plan?
Yeah, we don't really see a role for the inventory. This is the consultant's essentially going to build a database for us. It'll certainly be available, and if people wanted to play around with it, that's not a problem.
Okay, I just want to kind of clarify what engagement for what. Okay, good. And then once the database is established, will the city be able to update it? For example, can the urban forester update it as conditions change on a tree-by-tree basis, or would we need to do a round of consultants to do that?
That was one of our considerations in selecting the consultant, was to make sure that what they're doing, they use a kind of semi-proprietary database, but it does link into our GIS system. So when they're all finished and they move on to other clients, we'll have their work product that will be in our GIS system that can then be updated.
And that was another question. So the city has a GIS system that I think now has new sidewalk condition data in it and repair data in it. Will that all be in one data set so we can look at trees and sidewalk repair together in one GIS system?
I'm not the city's GIS expert, so I couldn't tell you exactly how that works. But yes, there are definitely different layers in that GIS file.
Okay, so it's all going to go in the same database, basically.
Right.
Okay, and then let's see. Do you know if is one of them? I didn't see a list of the different. I guess I didn't see a list of the things you're going to ask in the inventory. But is that what you're saying? You're going to let them come up with. Okay, inventory will include blah blah blah. Trees placed on.
It may be in your staff report, I think.
Yeah, I did see something there, but will it include also some assessment of tree health, or is that outside their expertise?
They will be using a rating scale, depending on, I think it's like rated poor. It's a standardized, I think our ISA, but yeah, they will go ahead and give a condition of the general health of the tree as well.
Okay.
There will also be like a digitally time-stamped photo of each tree as the data is being collected.
Okay, good. Will it also, sometimes we want to know, like, there's been situations where a tree is removed in one location, and then the city always tries to plant new trees, and the urban forester has identified some sort of vacant spaces where, like, if a new tree can, so for example, sometimes there's a situation where a tree needs to be removed, but for a new development of some kind, but they're going to put a driveway there. So you can't put it there, so you have to put it somewhere else. And so will there also be a list of will there be a way to figure out where there are sort of vacancies or opportunities to plant new trees, basically?
I think that would be part of phase 2, where we would have as part of a program, that if there does need to be a tree relocation, how should we approach that? And, it's an interesting question that we haven't, to be honest with you, I don't think we've gone into that level of detail, but that's certainly something that could be added to their scope of work to help us make those decisions.
Because it's kind of inventorying where there are not trees. They're being told to inventory where the trees are, and this would be like, okay, where are there not trees, and where are the conditions appropriate, to put a new tree. So I think that, I don't know how that'd be something to think about either in this round or a future one. And
I just wanted to cut in there that I think that's a real good idea, because looking at the process that we're talking about here, you're out there inventorying the trees, you might as well inventory the gaps for trees and put them in the database so we don't have to redo that. But go ahead, Commissioner.
yeah, or for example, on my street, there's some places where there's multi-unit buildings side by side that have driveways that extend through several lots, basically, and so you couldn't put any trees anywhere. Like if you look where the trees actually are on my block, that would tell you something about how dense the canopy is. But if you also knew where the vacancies were, and you could say, oh, well, this block has, quite a few vacancies where the city should focus, or this neighborhood has quite a few vacancies, and this one actually is pretty much maxed out. That could be helpful information as well.
I can add a couple of comments to that. That'll definitely be part of the inventory. I believe the data collectors will be including like the empty tree basins to incorporate as well. And so with the data we'll have a good idea of where specific planting like targets may be. And a bigger picture of the urban tree canopy, we want to address the disparity in tree canopy coverage across Albany neighborhoods. So we could possibly target certain neighborhoods that are very lacking in trees and so forth.
Okay, good. And part of what I'm talking about is empty tree wells, but also like paved, just garden strips along the curb which may be paved over or may not be, that could have a tree there, but maybe there never has been.
Unfulfilled tree planter locations.
Potential.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a good idea because there's clearly some sidewalks that have been paved over, maybe even by the property owner that might have had. Anyway, I have a question about if crown size is going to be part of the inventory, because it says crown condition and then it says breast, what is it? Size, diameter at breast height. But is the actual crown, like the diameter of the crown, going to be also inventoried? And the reason I ask that is that that's real value for shading, right? And so, what are those trees along Key Route? Those big, is it the redwoods? What are the big?
Big trees.
Some sort of pine of some kind. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
They don't really have a crown. There's not a crown that shades a whole area. It's kind of just like, it goes up. And so I think there is, even as potentially problematic as camphors can be or something like that, they have really wide crowns. Anyway, so that's my request, if that could be added.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I have 2 trees in front of my.
Well, hold the phone though. Aren't we, I'm confused about procedure, because aren't we just doing questions now? We're not
questions, yeah.
making any action in this.
She asked a question which was how to, are they going to keep track of crowns? And she justified that question.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, because then we're requesting something. But that's an individual request. We haven't voted on it. That's my point.
Right.
Martin's still going.
Oh, yeah. And then my last thing is that, for example, I have 2 trees in front of my property and it's on the street. And if you're just counting trees, there's 2. But one of them is tall with a deep, nice canopy, and the other one's been there for like 6 or 7 years, and it's still the scrawniest tree you can imagine, barely taller than I am. So
underperforming trees.
Yes, and I think it's just a different species. I've asked John about it, the urban forest, and he says, "Oh yeah, that's kind of what they do," but it's also scrawny. Anyway, so in any event, it'd be good to be able to, in this data, be able to differentiate those situations. Thank you.
And on that topic,
Well, sorry, just if I could get the answer though, because that was the question. Is that sort of in the scope right now, the crown diameter size?
I'm not confident with that, but I can go ahead and double check.
Okay, great, thank you.
and just, we're still going around, but just while we're talking about inventory, what I wanted to ask, is the inventory just of street trees, or does it include things like trees on private residences?
Yeah, we're just looking at street trees with this. We understand that there's lots of other issues with respect to Albany Hill or the waterfront or private property, but this is really intended to be a focus on the street tree program.
Okay, and if there happens to be a tree in the 2 feet of public right-of-way in between the sidewalk and the homeowner's property, is that considered a street tree or not?
Between the
public right-of-way in Albany typically extends 2 feet inside, and have we run into that a lot, or do we know what that is?
I'm sure there are a few examples. I don't think there's a lot of it, but there's probably some examples of that. We'd have to, I think we will make sure that the consultant who's doing the inventory is aware of exactly where the property line is. So if there are a few examples of that, we try to capture.
I guess one reason I'm bringing it up is it seems, in my case, I recently planted some trees very close to that section, just a few feet from the property line. And I would think that would impact, if you're going to try to put a street tree there, then it's going to impact the shading and so forth. But okay, so that's all I want to know. And then we'll still have Armendariz and Abbott. I'm sorry, Price. I was looking, Commissioner Price yeah.
This kind of goes back to the questions about opportunities for more planting. It seems like one of the end goals of the master plan is to establish goals, right? Long-term goals for planting.
Absolutely.
And so does that include being as specific as like changing ordinances to look at spacing of trees especially for new developments, and how to kind of maximize planting in like a more like organized fashion, especially for new developments?
Well, I wouldn't say especially for new developments, because we don't get much new development. But it's definitely looking at the long-term pace of expanding what we have in those vacant spots and renewing trees as they reach the end of their life, and taking a long-term view of that, and having a program and a budget, and think about the number of people that we need to do that, and where to focus our priorities on doing that.
More, or is that? Okay.
I would.
Well, wait, whoa, this is on the
Let
same.
Todd ask his questions.
Commissioner
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, sorry. I see I was looking at this way and have it. Thanks. Go ahead, Commissioner. Without further ado,
You guys are also
Commissioner Abbott.
small. Yeah, I just had a quick question, and we've touched on it so far, but I just wanted to point out that, in at least the CAAP, the call is for an urban forestry plan. And I know that we're only talking about the street master plan tonight, and that's very focused. But I'm just curious if there are plans, or we are thinking about the next step, which is a more thoroughgoing, covering all trees, heritage trees ordinance, things like that within the city itself.
To be honest with you, no, not really. We are focusing right now on our street tree program, because that's where we're putting our staff and our financial resources. We haven't prioritized doing something on private property, and we're treating the parks and open space separately as kind of a park-focused effort to look at the park and then holistically, and then the trees are part of that analysis, but that's not part of this study.
Okay, I knew it wasn't part of this one. I just wanted to just kind of bring that forward. I think it's important. Thank you.
Any more questions from any commissioners? I still have one too, but Martin, you look like you got one.
Go.
Okay, so this is just kind of maybe to give kind of a Reader's Digest version of this. So then I guess a lot of these questions that we're asking, it seems like are kind of half, you don't know yet because we haven't gotten there, right? So we're going to do the inventory and then we're going to start working more on the plan after we got the inventory. Is that kind of, one thing I did want to come back to, you saw me perk up when Commissioner Martin mentioned a database. And so I guess what sort of things are going to be in this database that we have besides, the trees? And do we have any ideas about that?
It's a pretty well-established database. It's an ArcGIS. It has streets, sewers, storm drains, street lights, fire hydrants, all sorts of stuff in it.
Okay, so this is basically, and I'm not talking about the whole GIS database, I'm just talking about the part pertaining to this. So basically, it's like the data points then are the utilities, what the utility locations are, and the trees. We're going to add the trees, I guess.
We're adding trees to an existing built-out database.
Okay, and, oh, I see. So it has trees in it, but they're not current.
I believe it has some trees, but it's not considered comprehensive and not really effective as a planning tool.
Okay, so we're going to get this database up to where it's current, right? And then kind of to follow on Commissioner Martin's question, are we going to commit to keeping that database current as we do stuff and not? I happen to work with databases myself, and I know kind of once you don't keep it current, then it's kind of a headache to go back. Yeah, but okay, this sounds
something that our
great.
Public Works Department maintains, and I'm sure Mark Hurley would be happy to come in and tell you all about it. They're working really hard on developing it, and it's in far better shape than it was a decade ago. Still some work to do. This is one of those pieces that's not complete, but it's becoming a useful tool for them, and they're working.
Okay, it looks like, did you still have a question?
Just remembered what it was, yeah. And to follow up on what you just said, it would be nice to, I'm wondering if we could see a presentation at the end of their work as to what their data looks like, and then maybe a separate agenda would be how it integrates into all the other things that the city has from Mark Hurley. So my question is, you mentioned that to Commissioner Price's question that, well, there isn't really much development right now, and so that isn't a major factor. There's other, incentive reasons for doing this. But of course, there are plans for more development between the bowling alley, which the commission already voted to remove a ton of trees and replace them with new trees, and then also with San Pablo Avenue specific plan and other changes that are in the works. But also we saw for general public works kind of things like Marin Avenue near San Pablo. That was all redone. That wouldn't really be called a new development, but it was like all the trees there were ripped out and planted, and there wasn't really I remember at the time, the commissioners were lamenting that, we don't really have a master tree plan to help inform what should go here. It was kind of more of a shooting from the hip kind of thing, but also like what should work well in those spaces. I mean, it wasn't just random, but it wasn't a bigger picture look, which hopefully we'll have after this process, which is great. And also what came before us a few months ago was Pierce Street. There was a PG&E action that required removing a bunch of trees on Pierce Street to do what they needed to do to fix a problem. And so even though there's not maybe big developments going up all over town, there are all these other things. And so wanted to make sure that this, wondering if this can handle those kinds of changes to the tree landscape.
Absolutely, and Commissioner Price, I think I interpreted your question as kind of private development, but Commissioner Martin is right that it really, our infrastructure work may end up impacting street trees as much or more than any private development. And yes, this would be a tool that we would come back to repeatedly to make decisions about how to save things, or if we can't save them, how to replace them appropriately.
I think, if I would, I'd put Mr. Bond's comments in perspective. When he says it's not as much as other cities, it's because most of relative to other cities, we don't have the same amount of big construction. Because Albany's mostly little single-family homes and small businesses. Whereas if you go to Berkeley, they're going to have a lot more. It's still important, but if you look at the number of trees we're talking about that come before a commission, we had one special meeting for a bowling alley, and then, so yeah, I think both points are valid. Okay, so if there's no more commissioner questions, do we have public comment? Jeremiah.
Yes, sir. So, this is kind of just a presentation, and it's not kind of a finalized. Couple questions. So, when they go and find a tree, let's say there's a tree on Solano, is there going to be, a little plaque put on the tree, the species name, maybe a little picture of a QR code or something to where you could take a picture with your smartphone and it'll say, oh, wow, this is this kind of tree, so that's kind of more community engagement, right? So let's say the average citizen's just walking around Albany or Albany Hill or just on Key Route or something like that on the median, like, wow, what kind of tree is this, And then at the base of the tree, there's some sort of plaque or QR code or something interactive, right? And so speaking of interactive, I guess this is going to go on the city's website. I would suggest maybe a fun app. There's an old Albany High School student that I graduated with that worked for Google and created this website called appypie.com. And it's a really easy website to drag and drop and make apps. And so it'd be kind of a fun app. And speaking of community engagement, I'm glad Commissioner Abbott and a few commissioners suggested about private property, because that was my envision as well. If you have a tree in your backyard, a large pine tree or oak tree, it would be a good way to engage the community so they can be involved and say, hey, we have this tree in our yard, and that would just add to the canopy to the city of Albany. I'm sure some calculations will be made on the total of trees and the total number of CO2 it takes out of the air, something, and how green Albany really is. And I was wondering if it's going to include trees on the school district, because there's trees on school district property, and those trees are in Albany. So please consider doing an inventory of the school district trees to add to the map. Also, how big of a trunk counts as a tree? I mean, is this company going to go around and say, oh, that tree's not big enough, so we're not going to count it? So what's the diameter size of the tree? Because maybe we just planted a tree, and it's just really small. So I was wondering the size. And maybe on this thing we can add a list of approved trees and a list of not approved trees, just fully interactive, just everything about trees. And so, yeah, I was wondering, Albany Hill, is every single tree on Albany Hill going to be inventoried? And that's about it. Thank you.
Jeff, could you maybe answer some of his questions as well? Or?
With respect to the placards or QR codes or something like that, I think that would be something that would be interesting to see what our selected consultant would recommend. I spent a fair amount of time in Sacramento, and I know they've done some really interesting things in Sacramento. It's not a QR code, but they do some things with their street trees to engage people in it. So I'm sure there are other examples that I'm personally not familiar with, but our selected consultant would know about. The school district, no, we weren't planning to do the school district. They're responsible for their own property. They're kind of separate from the city's area of responsibility. Be happy to collaborate with them, but that really would need to be something that they would be interested in doing as well. I would expect that our consultant doing the inventory would measure every tree, no matter how small or large. And in phase 2, I would expect that we would get a list of approved street trees that come out of it.
Were there any, and thank you, Jeff, were there any people at home that wanted?
Yes, we have one attendee with their hand raised.
How many?
So far, one.
One. Oh, okay, I thought I said 10, so, okay, let's go ahead. Hello.
Hi, it's John Hawkridge,
Oh.
urban forester.
Are
Sorry I
you
couldn't-
speaking for the city or as a citizen?
Both.
Oh,
Well, unofficially for the city? Does that make sense? I don't know. I couldn't make it tonight. I'm kind of under the weather, so. But I just wanted to make a couple points. First of all, we're talking about, I think it was mentioned, but these are two different things. We're talking about an inventory which builds a database, and that will be used as a tool to work on the street tree master plan or the urban forestry master plan. A database is it's a living tool. It's a management tool. It's something, someone asked if it'll be updated. Of course, as a tree gets pruned or removed or a new tree planted or whatever, there's a service request, the stakes are put out. This is what I'm hoping anyway. All of this will be kept as history for each individual tree. So there's a record per tree. I'm not sure how it'll be structured. I think a record per tree or a record per address and then per tree within each address. Empty basins, I believe, are going to be part of this, and I think they're going to be looking for obvious empty basins. So where there's a cutout in the sidewalk, that's going to be considered an empty basin, and they can make note of that. However, at this point in time, we can't plant the tree unless the property owner is in agreement with that. At this point, again, they're technically responsible to take care of the tree, to water the tree. So that's a tough thing. I've been trying to stick in trees wherever I can, wherever it makes sense to stick in trees or to plant trees. I shouldn't say it that way. What else? Oh, the trees by the high school are deodar cedars. For Julia. Let's see. And I think what we're calling street trees are trees in the planting strip, not on the other side of the sidewalk where there's a yard that extends into the public right of way. Again, at this point, we've been treating that as private property. We have retaining walls and plants and sometimes trees in that area, and that's considered the property owner's property. I don't think we want to be planting trees in that 2 feet in someone's front yard. There may be cases where there's no other place and possibly the property owner agrees to that, then sure, we could do that. So let's see, what else? The Marina Avenue project was mentioned. I don't know if you were talking about planting or the removals of the trees, and I feel the removals were done way too hastily. That street was empty for years. Those trees were removed long before I came to the city, and it took several years to get some new trees planted there. So, and then let's see. As far as projects, construction, as it stands now, when there's a reconstruction or an ADA or a new garage or something along those lines, I inspect the property and will require, if there's no tree there, we require that they apply to have a tree planted. If there is a tree there, we require them to set up tree protection so the tree isn't damaged during the work. let's see. And Jeremiah mentioned basically people being able to get information about trees in the city. And I think part of the plan is that our database will be available to the public where they can go onto the map and click on a dot, click on an address, and there'll be a dot or a symbol for representing a tree. And you click on that and you'll be able to see all the information, the type of tree, maybe if we have the information when it was planted, you know, the size, maybe some history, maintenance history. I'm not sure exactly what'll be there, but I think some basic information will be there where someone will be able to walk down the street and say, this is a beautiful tree, what kind is it? And you can click on the map and find that out. And you know, the master plan, I think, is going to address species and uniformity and these kind of things, which I'm not a big fan of. Basically, a uniform urban forest can lead to problems when there's a disease that attacks a specific species, or all the trees mature at the same time, or that sort of thing. For me, tree planting is site-specific. You and your neighbor may have a suitable space for entirely different species of tree, or even on your property, you might have two entirely, like Brian does. I don't know when they were planted or how they were chosen, but yeah, that's, you know, there's the size of the planting strip, there's overhead wires, there's utilities. We talked about these things. So I think that's all I wanted to mention at this point, so.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about this, whether we can have, because now the staff report kind of got split, because so can we have questions again, or?
Well, of course, the commission can continue to discuss and comment as much as you need to and want to.
That's good, because it brings up a lot, and I wasn't expecting it, because it was after the public comment. And then, but also, are there more people waiting at home? No, that's good. Go ahead, Commissioner Martin.
Okay, yeah, one question I had was, it's come up a couple times as to how to handle trees that are on the property side of the sidewalk. And one street that came to mind is, I was wondering how the city, how staff thinks it would be handled would be the block along the north side of Memorial Park on Thousand Oaks there, where there's these large trees that alternate on either side of the sidewalk, and they're just ripping up the, you know, it's like an asphalt sidewalk, because it's like off-roading it when you go down that path. And so some of the, and also school property came up, and I don't know where school property exactly ends and begins. It might all be city property along the baseball field there and so forth. But definitely some of those trees are on the, you know, away from on the other side of the sidewalk, but I would think they really should be inventoried, because they're right there at the sidewalk ripping things up. And so how does staff see that sort of situation handled?
You know, I think I don't have a, you know, a predetermined answer to that question. I think that, you know, one way might be to identify some, if we were to use the master plan process, to have the consultant look at some particular targeted areas for special study. There may be a better term than that, but, you know, kind of the hot spots of, like, okay, Memorial Park along Thousand Oaks, this is an area where there's a particular different challenge than you might have in other places of the city, and have them address that particular unique situation. I think that particular situation is maybe a little different, because I know there's been lots of discussion about that over the years. I personally haven't been involved with that, so I don't want to go beyond my knowledge base in answering your question. But it may be that we can get answers to that particular situation outside of the scope of the master plan. And if that's the case, great. But if we need to use the master plan consultant in the master plan context to do it, then yeah, maybe we have them focus on a couple special places.
Well, part of my concern is that the inventory itself, people have been saying, and John's been saying that, and the question was from Chair Beal, is will trees that are near the sidewalk on the property side of the homeowner's side be inventory that are near the sidewalk? And it sounds like no, but they might, shade out other like street trees if they're right there. And then with Thousand Oaks, right, I think of them all as street trees, honestly, but they're all within a few feet of the curb.
You've raised an issue we haven't talked about with respect to the property between the property line and the sidewalk on the say the resident side. So I think we need to think about how we want to address that, if we want to put that in the inventory or not. I wouldn't say that we've reached any conclusions about it, because I think you're raising it.
If I could cut in here, I think, so there's two things. There's the current state of what the vision of the inventory is, and then there's the current state of what the tree master plan is.
That's right.
And there is a bit of a chicken and the egg, because, but then we're talking about the tree canopy of the city as a whole that is more going to fit into the area of the Climate Action Committee. But I think where Commissioner Martin and I think a couple of us are going with this, is that it would be good, we're envisioning a database of all the trees in the city, because I don't see how we can make good decisions without that. So it seems like in the future, we're going to have to think about going in that direction, and we may have to think about modifying the goal of the master plan to be broader, because it seems like it's going to be difficult to separate these. But
Yeah,
go ahead, Commissioner Martin.
I wouldn't go that far, but what I would just recommend is that when the city and the consultants think about whether or not to treat trees on the other side of the sidewalk, to go over to Thousand Oaks right there and come up with a plan that would, if it's not going to include those that are right on the sidewalk that are, then there needs to be a good reason why not, and that street in particular should be, thought of. And as for is there a uniform policy that's just going to be trees right on the curb and ignore the other ones a few feet away? Or are we going to do, I think what you were suggesting, of sort of special zones that are just weird?
Special study, he said.
Okay, special study.
Yeah.
Got to have a good.
Because it's outside the scope. What we've brought up is currently outside the scope. And we're suggesting trying to add it in, but.
So let's kind of get this organized a little bit. I would say for the inventory, phase one, if the tree is on city right away, I think it should be in the database. I haven't talked to my colleagues, John and others, so we should have a discussion among our staff before any conclusion is reached. But if it's a city tree outside of a park, which we're dealing with separately, but if it's a city tree along a street, I think we need to know that, because we as a city is responsible for that tree. Even if it's on the property owner's side of the sidewalk, if there's a problem with it, that's going to be at least partially our responsibility. So I think it should be in the inventory. Whether or not it's part of our program of enhancing street trees or not, that's a different question. We may not want to go and be planting new street trees in those locations, but in terms of knowing what we've got and knowing what we're responsible for, we should probably do that.
And I think the key to what John said was, it's normally this is initiated by the homeowner, because the homeowner is the one who has the biggest stake. Between the city and the homeowner have the biggest stake in the tree. And to have like a sort of, the city is dictating things, that's not really the kind of society that everyone wants to live in. That it's not that's communism. We don't want. So we want to have.
Well, it depends then where ultimately the liability goes. So one of the policy discussions we might have is, does the city take on all the liability for street trees?
Exactly.
And if this is a street tree, then yeah, we have a stake in it. If the liability stays with the property owners, then maybe it's something.
Probably it's ambiguous, and it depends on how the city defines
And
it.
before we get off track
Yeah,
with
but
that, I'd like to respond to the bigger canopy issue. Part of what we're trying to do with this master plan is create an operational program for us as city staff people to plan and budget our programs. So I get it that the big tree canopy holistically for the whole city is an important thing, but we're not going to be planting trees in people's backyards. We might have some incentive programs.
Not in this context.
Not in this
Not in the
context.
current
So
context.
what we're really trying to do is come up with a program that John and his colleagues can start to work on that, and then that's why we're focused in on the street tree part of it. Expanding it to other things is certainly theoretically possible, but it becomes a much bigger beast of a study with much different kinds of issues. And we're anxious to get our street tree program running, and you are too. So let us focus on that, and we can deal with the private property issues separately. After that, it would be my proposal.
Yeah, it seems like it would make sense to go with what's planned out and then get fancier later once the process, we've streamlined the process. And go ahead, Commissioner Moten.
Yeah, just to follow up with what you said about the city should be looking into, which I agree, trees that are in the cities, do you call it the right-of-way between the sidewalk and the property owner's actual property? So I think that's important and would include some trees that are really close that might be shading out the trees right on the curb and whatever. But also something that was brought to my attention a few years ago was related to that is that Preston Jordan, who's of course mayor now, but a few years ago he shared, he had a database of a city map showing how far back that goes at each property. Have you seen that?
Yes.
And so for most places, it is what Chair Beal said of, a foot or two or whatever. But there's a few parts of town where it's 7 feet back. And part of the issue there is that those property owners are paying significantly less property tax than everybody else is because the city, that's considered city property. But the city isn't putting dog parks there. The city isn't putting gardens for people there. So they're using it like their own thing. But so in any event, the city would need to be mindful of how far back it goes at each property. So you folks have that, and you can.
We work with that information all the time.
Okay, and so that will be shared with the consultants as well. Okay, so then they can figure out if this tree in the front yard is within however many feet of the sidewalk and everything.
Well, yes, we'll talk to figure. I don't know exactly how we'll incorporate that into what they're doing, but we'll figure it out.
I think this is kind of something new we're asking you for.
Yes.
So I think we kind of need to wrap this up because we spent a lot of time on one item. But yeah, it sounds like maybe you could come back to us, or you will at the next report we have on this. You might have some more ideas about this, but to expect you to, make a big shift tonight and say, yeah, we're going to put this in, I think would be too much for us to ask.
Appreciate your questions, and they're good questions and observations, and we'll incorporate that into the phase 1, which is now underway, or will be very shortly. It's been approved. Our next step in coming back to you is with a draft RFP in probably a couple of months.
Yeah.
And that would be your next opportunity to think about and talk about the big picture kind of planning and policy side of this, which is really where we need your input the most.
Yeah. Okay. So I do want to. I think we've gone on about this enough. So thank you. And let's move on to the next item.
I had some comments. It's comment time, right? Sorry. I think Commissioner Abbott might have some comments too.
Didn't see, see, I tried to cut it off, and see, now you know it's your last chance, and you're going to speak up.
I just wanted to say I'm like excited that this is in progress because I know it comes up a lot. Like the last couple of years I've been on this commission, like this need for this tree planting. So I'm excited to see it, and I know it's going to be helpful for the city for planning and maintenance. And but my mind goes like where Jeremiah was talking about was this exciting opportunity for community engagement, and I'm just. And I'm glad John mentioned, you know, the database will be available, and I wonder if there'll be opportunities for like engaging teachers maybe with the database and, you know, potential projects there for their students. And we always talk about the need for education and maintenance of trees, which then kind of translates to private property trees and helps homeowners maintain the trees. So I'm excited, and we'll be anxious to hear what those community engagement activities will be. That's it.
Did you have any response to that, or no?
No, completely agree, and I think it's a really good observation, and a good street tree program will get people to plant trees in their yards if they haven't already. So
let's go to Commissioner Abbott and then Commissioner Price. It looked like you, unless you were.
Thank you. Just a couple quick comments. I know that John mentioned the database would include history, and it sounded like, I just wondered how far, if it'll be possible, maybe not for the consultant, but maybe somehow interns or something to record whatever history we have going back. So it's not just that the database has the slots to record a limb drop or it's been pruned or whatever, but that you can go back however the records allow and record that historically. Because that's the sort of thing that's really valuable to us when we're trying to make a decision about an application for removal, for instance. Another question or another point I just wanted to be sure to mention, and I know that this is very early in the process, there'll be multiple opportunities to make this, make this statement, but I just want to be sure when we get into the master plan part that there's something about consequences for people who mistreat their trees. We've run across this many times. People damage a tree. I remember one time somebody applied to have a tree removed. That application was denied. It came back a year later and they butchered the tree. And you know, obviously we felt bad about that, but there was no consequence. So I'm hoping that the master street tree plan will include consequences for abuse of trees. And that's my point. Thank you.
And I wanted to ask about that, Mr. Bond. And sorry, I forget all the titles. Director Bond. So does enforcement sort of, there's law enforcement issues associated with trees in a way, because to follow on to Commissioner Abbott, what I've witnessed is just wanton destruction of trees. We're big delivery, we just paid all this money to have a street tree planted, and a delivery truck comes and takes out a big limb, you know? And so I guess, is this all part of the plan, or is it part of something else, or is it in scope?
Enforcement is real hard. For a variety of reasons, because it really gets into a legal realm and you know, creating a body of evidence that can be supported in court if we're going to have real teeth to enforce. Actually,
I should back up. More enforcement is the police's job, but in terms of rules or penalties.
So I was getting to that. So I would expect that it is part of the street tree master plan and the refinements to the city's ordinance. There would be an enforcement section, and there would be penalties and violations. I don't know of any cities that do a very good job at this. I would hope that we have a consultant that can help point us to somebody who has figured out the best way to do that. But it's hard because this stuff happens, and when you know, they don't do it when John is standing in front of them. They don't do it when we're standing in front of them, because they know there would be consequences. They wait till we leave, or the delivery truck just rams into the limb and drives off. So the enforcement side is hard, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do it.
It seems like maybe then education somehow, maybe, because education's kind of the way to prevent the need for enforcement. But maybe that's something we need to look at, because I don't think most people know, anything about these street trees. They're just these trees that are there and they don't know, why. So, okay, were there other commissioners?
Commissioner Price.
Commissioner Price.
Thanks. I had a follow-up question on the public engagement. Is the public engagement process or design falling into the master planning scope for the external consultant, or is that falling under like the purview of the city to design?
I would say we would like the consultant to lead it and be creative about it. We would support it as much as possible, encourage it, but it would really be the community interacting with the experts, the consultant team primarily, with us backing them up as necessary.
Great. I mean, I think that they'll have, like, Commissioner Mendries was talking about creative ideas about how to engage people.
Commissioner Martin?
Yeah, one more quick one was people were mentioning sharing the GIS data, and that could be really good for a lot for education and engagement of the trees, but it sounds like that same database will also have like critical city infrastructure in there, and so the city might not want to share where all the gas lines are, and I mean, maybe the city just shares it all anyway, but that's something to think about.
It's pretty much an open book.
And on that note, I do see your hand, John. On that note, the similar issue that he reminded me of is data privacy. Because if you're taking pictures of, people's homes or whatever, and, Google has all these things they have to do to filter it out. Is that something you're going to think about in the plan?
Absolutely. And we're not going to take pictures of people's homes as part of this database. We'd be taking a picture of a tree. We're very sensitive to that here.
Yeah.
So
okay, good. Okay. I guess John's back there behind you, and he's just dying to say something. John.
Yeah. If you look at Berkeley's webpage, they have their tree inventory online, and it's basically a map of the city with dots where every tree is located. You click on it, and you get some general information, species, and whatever other information they have on the tree right there. It doesn't give you property owner information. We wouldn't be doing that. I don't know about gas lines and all that other stuff. I think for the trees, as far as I envision this anyway, it'll just be kind of behind the firewall or in front of a firewall or something, where you only see a certain amount of information. You're not going to dig deep and see all our working information and personal, private property information, all that. Thank you.
So there'll be basically
great,
a public view and a private view, is what you're saying.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's how it'll work.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Commissioner Martin, any more?
I just said thank you.
No, I just wanted to know if was that, okay. I'm getting confused. Okay, so anyone else? Okay, I guess thank you for your time this evening, and wish you good luck with the project.
We'll see you again in a few months. Thank you.
And then, so we're on to the next item, which is subcommittee reports. Does anyone have any subcommittee reports? Mr. Chang Fei?
Yep. So let's see. So we're talking about the multi-use flex courts. So that's a subcommittee that myself, Commissioner Martin, and Commissioner Kent are on. And Commissioner Kent's not here today. So Isabel, I actually sent you something by email. Okay, great. Oh, good. So just to talk first about the scope, and this is something that we might need to consider with the full commission, but what we thought was, in terms of the area, it would be all parks and open space in Albany, including Albany Beach.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, you said something about we might want to discuss as the whole commission?
Well, get feedback from you.
Oh, well, you do understand the subcommittee can't make a decision. It goes
Yeah, that's
anywhere.
why I'm talking. That's why we're talking about.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So, and what we're thinking about is really, one, the first primary being multi-use options on existing athletic fields. So, for example, the tennis courts and also the baseball fields. But then also potentially, and this is the question I have for the commission, is do we want to consider folding into the subcommittee other recreation options on other underutilized spaces, such as, I think there's a space in Ocean View that used to be a volleyball area. I'm not sure. Or,
Yeah, it was volleyball, and then we were considering it for bocce.
yes. And then there's, areas along Key Route that are not really designated for a specific sport of any kind. So I think that's one question. But before we go there, I think we'll just talk about what our approach is. So just to be more clear about exactly what we're talking about in terms of the multi-use flex courts, this is a picture of, is there any way to make that any bigger? Sorry, okay. This is in Vacaville, tennis courts that were converted to multi-use basketball, volleyball, and tennis. So I don't know why I can't, it doesn't really, that first picture, I'm not even remembering it looking like that, but.
Can you double click or right click on the picture to open it up in something else?
It was sent, it came in as part of embedded in an email.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah.
Well, so maybe you can scroll up because that one's not as descriptive the way it's shown right now. I thought, so actually the second picture, well, maybe we can just sit there. So the idea is not, this wouldn't mean, if you put it on a tennis court, this doesn't mean that you don't play tennis. It's just that you can actually flex in and play other sports too. So this one is a court that includes both tennis and basketball. And you can see they have the basketball hoops on the sides, on both sides. In the case of, even just thinking about Memorial, I don't know how that would really work because we don't have like an enclosed space. There's this, anyway, you all know what Memorial Park courts look like, but if you can scroll up to this last one, I think this last one is the third picture right here. So again, just where you can put the basketball hoop. So it would be a half court. And then, can you scroll down and up? Yeah, if there's another one, yeah. So I'm not sure, and sorry, these are Chris's pictures that he was originally going to describe, so I apologize for not. No, I think this might also be one that flexes into both a tennis or volleyball court. And volleyball is really popular. At least it's very popular at the middle school. And there's really no volleyball anywhere in Albany in terms of a public space. So I think it would be really interesting option to include that also. So that's an idea of how it would look. But we also want to look at baseball fields. And so Brian can talk a little bit about some of the research he's going to do, but just to let you all know, we're doing research. Chris and I, Commissioner Kent and I are going to research what other cities are doing that have multi-use courts. And we already asked Isabel what questions that she might have when we interview the city staff. But some of the questions would be how they manage usage, also what vendors they'd recommend for those sort of multi-use spaces, and then and also just how they manage public requests and that kind of thing. And I am also going to do some research into meeting with the school district to find out what their plans are for the high school, or once the portables are moved out of the area where they used to have full basketball courts. So that's something for us to consider also. Brian, do you want to go ahead?
Before you go on, I just, for sake of clarity and to help the presentation, can you remind me what the scope of the subcommittee was exactly? Because we just have abbreviation on the agenda.
It was really just named flex multi-use courts.
I think, there was a statement in
I don't remember what the work plan statement was.
Researching the feasibility or something like that? Or?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's the feasibility of flex court in Albany. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily limited to converting existing locations. In other words, talking about expanding it, would that be in the scope? Or, in other words, other locations where we don't have facilities, is that part of the scope?
We'd have to look. I think it was part of the master plan.
Okay, it doesn't
scope.
strike you as a red
I can't
flag.
recall right now.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's flex court in general, so it's,
So there's a lot of leverage on how far we can go. Okay, continue.
Yeah, I just looked up our work plan, and it says research and development standards and guidelines for flex court integration. So that's what we're working on. And to give it maybe a little bit more context is, we're a built-out city. We don't have a lot of open space or farm fields nearby, or that the city can easily expand into. And so we're looking at how to maximize use of what we've got. And so one of those ways is with the existing tennis courts, for example, that Julia just showed. And then another is, as we did the Parks Master Plan, and we were, kind of thinking outside the box as to how can we optimize how are things being used now, and how can we optimize those uses, and what do we have at our disposal? And you look at Memorial Park, and you realize that, wow, maybe a quarter of it is this one baseball field. So how can fields like that be multi-use? And so I've done some preliminary, research into that, and it looks like people do. You can sometimes overlay a whole soccer field on top of a baseball field. So we'd need to take some measurements. There's a range of sizes that soccer fields can be, it turns out, and to be legit. And then how big are our baseball fields? One question for city staff, maybe Isabel or Sid know. For I think the only two baseball fields we have are at Ocean View Park and Memorial Park, is that right?
yes, city-owned, yes.
City-owned, and then UC has the ones in the village. So another question is, are they fully city-owned, or is there some MOU with the schools for both ball diamonds, or?
Yeah, both fields are heavily used by the school district during school hours.
And that's in agreement with the city?
It's through the joint use agreement.
Joint use agreement, so that's some sort of memorandum of understanding or joint use agreement.
Right.
Okay, so it'd be good to see what that looks like, if you could send that to us, to the subcommittee.
The joint use agreement?
Yeah.
Sure.
And to know what does the city schedule things on those? I know my own children did a summer camp that took place on the ball field at the high school that just kind of happened to be there. They weren't really playing baseball all the time. Does the recreation department schedule things on those ball fields in the summer or other times?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So it'd be good to, I don't know, is there a way to summarize that for our subcommittee?
We'll have to look on if we have some sort of document that we could provide you. But usually it's our camps. During the summer, it's summer camps. And other field users also rent the ball fields for their camps. So the fields are heavily used by a number of entities as well as city programs, city-run programs.
So that would be good to see a little bit of that history of if you give us a sense of who's using it through what parts of the year. Because if it was only the school using the field during the 2 or 3 months of the season, that would be one thing. But knowing how it's used would be really helpful in what we're doing.
Sure, we can find a way to provide you that information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then let's see. Yeah, that was pretty much that.
Can I just add that Commissioner Martin is thinking of researching like the regulation size for the baseball fields, because there may be an opportunity even just right within the size, if the actual size of the baseball diamond is bigger than what we need, that there's even potentially space there. to use and not have to, conflict at all ever with the baseball fields. Anyway, so that's another thing that we're thinking about. And then also to the point in terms of the why, like obviously besides the fact that we have not much undeveloped space, but also just this idea of we have these nice parks that are kind of throughout the city, but we really want to maximize multi-use in every park so that everybody can walk there easily to use. So not just in one park will we have multi-use courts, but potentially as many as possible. So that's it.
Okay, so I think what we'll do at this one, we'll treat you as the presenters, and then we'll do commissioner questions, public comment, and then commissioner comments. We may even have an item. So Commissioner Mendries, do you have a question? No. Price? No. Okay, I don't have any questions either, so public comment.
I am really impressed. I really love this flex court thing with the volleyball net over the tennis court. I mean, I don't know why I've never seen that in my life. It's just really common sense, and it's great because the tennis court's there. You just have taller poles on the sides, and you have a volleyball court. And I love the basketball hoops on the sides. I mean, you got what, 3 or 4 sports in one small area? I mean, way to go. That's great. I really like that. So please keep up the good work. I hope that gets approved somewhere. And I was just gonna suggest, since we're talking about flex courts or certain, things like that, I was wondering about a putting green. Is there a room in Albany for just a little small putting green? Or some sort of like amusement golf putting area, kind of like the one at Scandia, right? It's kind of like a little fun golfing thing, but at least just a basic putting green. It could be AstroTurf. It could be, that's why it's low maintenance. You don't have to keep mowing the lawn, replace divots, but just maybe a little small putting green somewhere. And then after I wrote that down, I thought of this idea at the Bulb of a driving range. And I know we can't build anything down there because of the burrowing ground owls, but I don't know, maybe if it's just a driving range, the ground owls can still nest or something. But actually, we don't want golf balls hitting owls, so maybe that's not too well thought out plan. But at least the putting green, I think that's feasible. We could put a small putting green in somewhere. Yeah, that's it, thanks. Keep up the good work.
Did we have anyone at home that wanted to comment or no? Did Commissioner Mendries or Price or Abbott do everything? What I wanted to say, actually, I really like your idea about the memorial, or the median strip, because I think, and I was a little bit cautious about procedures and stuff, but the point is, I think we set out with this, that the idea of flex court is to make existing infrastructure more usable. But then thinking about what you're saying, we've got these spaces in Albany that have no infrastructure. And it's occurred to me that a flex court might be a good idea, a good way to cheaply put something and distribute the parks and recreation throughout the city, making it more equitable and getting people. So I think that's, that's a great direction. But it may be, that, we kind of have to understand the flex courts first before we can figure out how to deploy them. But I know that median has some, challenges about us using it. But I do actually want to have a question, not to cheat, but how long are these things? What are the dimensions of a flex court typically?
I guess it depends on which kind. Yeah. So, I mean, it's usually existing tennis court. I mean, from what we saw, it's existing tennis court, so you don't expand anything. You really just put some, install a basketball hoop on existing.
It's like a tennis court with that little buffer zone around it that it's just used like that, yeah.
So I guess, and Commissioner Abbott's I see you, Commissioner Abbott. So I guess that if we were talking about that median, like, would there be enough, or do you, kind of in your eyeball kind of vision of this, would there be enough space to have one going lengthwise across the medium, or would it have to be in another direction?
Yeah, I don't think we're necessarily thinking about any kind of big sport there. I think, there might, maybe ping pong table or maybe something else that could be a smaller, I don't even bocce ball. We haven't even thought about it, and it's clearly something we need to think more about.
I'm talking about how big a flex court is, if we were to consider.
Oh, I think it totally depends on the sport that you're putting in the flex court.
Oh, yeah, because of the size.
So the flex, it's almost, I actually don't know if flex is even, flex court is even the best use. That was what I think the master plan, it's a little bit confusing. I would just say multi-sport court. That's more, plain language of what it would be. Putting more sports on an existing court.
Right.
And, I've been to places where they just do that. There's only one court, so they put 3 different sports on it.
Though. We could make new courts.
Oh, I see.
I
think there's an option there with Pierce Street Park. I mean, we even talked about that. Like, is Pierce Street's undeveloped right now? And, wouldn't that be cool to provide that community with 3 sports instead of 1? So I think there's opportunities, but I don't know that we have much new air or open space or
And then,
developed land to do that on, so.
what I would say is that it's outside of our subcommittee's purview to decide, or not decide, we can't decide, but to figure out what to do on key route. Like, those are all different aspects of the Parks Master Plan. But yet, I think once we've researched these flex courts and what their parameters are, what their size is for tennis, basketball, and volleyball, say you want to do those 3 sports, then what kind of space do you actually need? And then when we look at key route, we'd say, oh, that won't fit, or oh, that'll fit. Or we look at Pierce Street and say, oh, wow, we could fit 2 of those there, or we could fit, And so that we wouldn't necessarily be looking at those spaces ourselves that have no court right now, that are not a play field right now, but places that are currently play fields, like the baseball fields and the tennis courts and so forth, that those are things, we're looking at what could be put there now. And then also, once we have the parameters for what the size and scope are, then the commission could look at key route and other places.
Well, I think on that note, I guess what I would say is to have the requirements, to give us kind of a Reader's Digest version of what the requirements are for a flex court would be a good deliverable of the, whenever you conclude your work. Commissioner Abbott.
Yeah, just a quick comment that, number one, thank you. I know that's a lot of research, and I know that it's very valuable information, very interesting. But one thing I haven't heard mentioned, and I want you folks to think as well as you're looking at this information, isn't just whether they will geographically fit, but whether it makes sense. And what I'm thinking of is traffic patterns. My guess, I think that it's probably the case that a lot of times at the same times people would want to play tennis, that's also the same times they want to play basketball. And that there's going to be times that everything's empty and other times everything's impacted. So I'm not sure, we really want to go down the path of putting in basketball courts when anytime somebody wants to use them, somebody's playing tennis. And if we do it the other way, so anytime somebody wants to play tennis, somebody's playing basketball, well, now we're just taking away tennis courts. And so I really like the idea of expanding, and I would like to see some way, and I hate to ask this of anybody, but to go out there and kind of do a survey of when things are being used. And that I think would really inform your decisions about what sports are appropriate and locations. So just not just geographically will it fit, but also how it would be used. That's my comment.
And that's a good question, because I think that some of that could be answered by the reservation system, right? If we looked at the reservation log. I would say that I personally think, we're going to just be getting information and providing it, but I do think that it may be a little different than status quo. So, I do think there's an equity issue too with how many tennis players can you fit on a tennis court and, in a certain period of time versus basketball, number of kids playing basketball. But so it's more like that is going to be a shift as people are going to have to share resources. And I don't know. That's just the only thing I'd say about that is it will cause some disturbance, I think. So.
I see her, yeah. Commissioner Price.
I think you talked about doing some operations research also, and I think that's a big question like how other cities deal with that and just in managing the use of the courts.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we want to provide for Isabel is talking to those staff and asking them how they manage it and manage the system and all of that, yeah.
And then also for the tennis courts at Memorial Park, those are used for like official school tournaments and all that. So whatever changes we'd make would have to still be in line with whatever the school's use is.
I guess just one point I wanted to make during your discussion was it would be good, I guess once we do have these select courts, to get information. So maybe if there's like a sign-up sheet or something, say, hey, you know, I use this for this sport, and just so there's some data that comes out of it somehow. Yeah, but we can't exactly have a spy camera there.
Or it could be the reservation system is one way, if you have online reservations.
Do they always have to reserve to use?
No, I'm just thinking that's one way to track, but isn't it like first come, first serve unless somebody has a reservation, so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I think, is there anything else? Okay, somewhere in here there's the agenda. Future agenda items. Commissioners, or you want to stay on this one?
The subcommittee.
We have a subcommittee that I wanted to give a very brief update on.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's community engagement, and Commissioner Price and I have been doing a bit of research on it. So just to remind us all, this was a work plan item that came out of the master plan, and the wording, I'll just read as research and develop processes for the city to engage with community groups that provide care, programming, and upkeep of Albany parks and open spaces. In the past couple of months, we have met with city staff, including Isabella and Sid, Margot Cunningham, and we've met with groups that steward the Bulb, the Creeks, and Albany Hill. We've been trying to find a contact for community gardens. I don't have a contact for anyone. If anyone can provide one, we'd like to talk with the groups who run that space. And we think that maybe next month we will have some recommendations, and we've got a lot of really interesting input from everyone we talked to. So we'll have more to say in December. But did I miss anything?
No, I think that's great.
Just as a point of order, if you do have more than a report for next month, and you would like to make some recommendations, then it would have to be an item on the agenda. Okay. So do let us know if you plan on having, more than a report, okay. And we will include it as an agenda item.
Yeah, and actually on that note, I would recommend if to the subcommittees that if you do have a subcommittee report, and you're going to have a report by the time the agenda, it's good to have something for Isabel to include in the agenda, because then the public will know. If there are people interested in the topic, then they'll know, and there'll be more, I guess I would hope, more public engagement. Though we don't get very much here, just Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, I think we already had public comment.
It's for the community engagement.
Oh, of course, gosh. And I don't think they're done yet, though. Go, or are you done?
I'm done.
You are. Okay, so.
I had one question. Didn't we have a subcommittee a few years ago that was looking into community gardens, which was one of the groups you weren't able to figure out how to get in touch with? And does anybody recall who was on that subcommittee and who they reached out to?
We can help with the contact for the community garden.
I just realized also there's a purse, or is that your purse? Oh, okay, I thought maybe Peggy had left her purse. Is that all for commissioner comments? Okay, Jeremiah?
Yeah, so regarding community engagement, I think this is a wonderful subcommittee. Community engagement, so when the city plants a tree, maybe some of the public can come help out or observe, or it could be more educational. When the city goes and plants a tree, instead of public works just coming out, digging a hole, making sure there's no utilities, throwing some water in there, some dirt, and job's done. have it be more fun, have it be more engaged with the community. Like maybe some students can show up, maybe, you know, if they plant the tree after school is out, between 2 and 5 o'clock. So maybe Public Works, when they plant a tree, it could be later on in the day. That way, community members, it could be more of a ceremonial thing. Because some of these trees are very historical, as Commissioner Abbott explained. Some of these trees are historical, and when we plant a tree, it's a monumental moment. And so then kids and community members are learning how to plant trees. That's a great thing. And also, I was going to suggest outreaching to the Gilchak Farm. You can talk to Effie or anybody at the Gilchak Farm about community gardens. That was my suggestion. I'm sure anybody there would be so glad and honored to help with developing community gardens in Albany. They're very knowledgeable. Thank you.
Still got a minute and a half. You can't walk away from the mic.
He's getting soft.
Okay. All right, well, that pretty much concludes that item. And we don't have a restroom report. Next meeting is our last one for this term, so we'll be presumably having a new batch of commissioners, some of them. But what are some of the things? I know we have something planned for the next meeting, right? Isabel, is there?
Yes, tentatively planned would be creek maintenance.
Creek maintenance.
And open
Okay.
space maintenance.
I know that was something there was a lot of mention of. And commissioners, did you have anything you wanted Diane to talk about next time? Commissioner Martin?
I mean,
Wait. Oh, Commissioner Abbott. I'm getting really.
I'm sorry, I didn't see people raising their hand. Go ahead, folks. Go ahead. No, me, okay. Okay, I'll jump in. Yeah, I just want to be sure. I mean, it sounds like we'll probably, if creek maintenance is on the agenda, we'll probably talk about it. But I feel very strongly that we need to start talking about the situation on Codornices Creek. It seems like it just gets shuffled around, and I think somebody needs to just put their foot down and say, we're going to talk about this. So if it starts here,
I'm sorry,
so
can
be
you
it.
tell us what situation you're referring to for?
This is the situation that Susan Schwartz from Friends of Five Creek has notified us many times about issues with the Codornices Creek communities living there, trash from the ball fields and the like.
Are we talking about the
concerns about
part of the
human
creek
safety.
that's within the jurisdiction of the committee, or?
Brian, I'm talking about the situation at the creek, which is definitely in our purview. So that's what I want to talk about, and I think it needs to be an agenda item.
Well, we are talking about creek maintenance on the next meeting, so.
Yeah, and
Mainly what I was getting at is because there's people listening that may not know what we're talking about. So go ahead, Brian.
yeah, thanks for that background. And so, and that was going to be basically my thing. At the last meeting, I asked, and Isabel wasn't here, but Ann took notes, for to have an agenda item about whatever the MOU is, the memorandum of understanding between the city of Albany, the city of Berkeley, and UC with regards to the maintenance of the creeks. There's a fund that, I forget where that came from exactly, but as best we can tell, what we were told as a commission, we were told that there's the meetings between those three parties are not considered public and are therefore not agendized, and so there's no opportunity for public engagement or public comment during those meetings. And so Friends of Five Creeks were asking for access to that, and so I think it's important to get an update on creek maintenance at the next meeting. I think it should also include that memorandum of understanding, and that it should also include what it would look like if those meetings were, to get those meetings to be publicly noticed and open to public comment.
So we're talking about a lot of things there. Is everything he just said within the scope of the planned meeting? Because it sounds like one of them maybe is not. So, but could you tell us, is it?
Well, I'll confer with Public Works on their presentation for the creek and open space and see what they can provide that's been requested.
Because the one thing that catches my mind is the public nature of this meeting. Is there anything we can do about that as a commission?
No, there's nothing you can do about it. That meeting is being planned by UC Village in conjunction with Friends of Five Creeks, and it sounds like that meeting has been rescheduled again to the end of January.
So that's not in the scope of the commission to try to make that
No.
public? Or, yeah, that's not something we could address. But what we,
what
it's
I would-
not. I mean, it's not. That's the city, that's their meeting, right? It's not, yeah.
So what I,
But it will be open to the public, and members of the public can attend the meeting. And
this is for one particular meeting you're talking about?
yes, it's the meeting that Susan Schwartz has been requesting of UC Village.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the meeting of the three
Yes.
that he talks about. That's not a public.
The regular
meeting.
meetings, like quarterly meetings or whatever they
Right, so
that's-
those meetings are between the different jurisdictions to talk about the MOU, what's in the MOU, and how the creeks should be maintained.
Right.
But UC Berkeley is planning a public meeting of all of the jurisdictions that will be open to the public. So the intent is to make the meeting public in January.
Wait, one time or ongoing?
I don't know. But I know they want to make the meeting public in January.
I mean, and what I would say is that we definitely have purview over this. I mean, certainly nobody has purview over all three groups, right? I mean, we all agree that, like, nobody's above.
Who runs the meeting? I mean, because you've just said it does.
I'm familiar with the meeting, so again, I can provide the information that you're requesting to the Public Works Department, and they will be able to provide you that information. What they can provide.
Sure.
at the next meeting.
But it doesn't, like, giving us a report on what the nature of the meeting is, but we can't, it sounds like it's being run by UC in their rules.
It's definitely it's the three jurisdictions who are part of this MOU. So it's Village, City of Berkeley, and the City.
So the City of Berkeley and the City of Albany are subject to public records, but the university is not, and that's what, is that kind of, what, maybe you could elaborate on what the.
I don't, well, all I know is that the three governmental bodies are meeting, and that we've been told that there's an assessment that they do not have public, they do not have a requirement for being a publicly noticed meeting with public input, and so we have oversight of the creeks in the city of Albany, and we don't have jurisdiction in Berkeley. We don't have jurisdiction on UC property. But we do have oversight of what's happening in Albany land, and so we can ask for the MOU to be brought to us and explained to us, and explained also what it would take to make those public meetings. No one party can declare that it is, right? I mean, or I don't know. I mean, so to explore how that works, and to get more public input, because it's been made very clear to us in these messages, which I don't think the public has seen all of these, but they're available for public record. Anybody wants to request them. The frustration that Friends of Five Creeks have seen in working with the various groups, and with the situation on the ground, and the property destruction and all kinds of things happening.
I just want to reiterate, this is the Albany Parks and Recreation Commission, and we're focused on the part that's in Albany, in our jurisdiction, which isn't necessarily all of Albany. I think it's the Friends of Five Creek is in a difficult position, because their charter is to look at something that is between jurisdictions, uses the boundary between jurisdictions. But as the Parks and Rec Commission, Isabel's just said that question's out of our scope. And I don't think I'm speaking, and so I think, the first part of what you said is in scope, but the second part about trying to make someone else have public, because they're not subject to it. It sounds like it's basically, is it it's an ad hoc committee of some sort that this is?
Again, I don't think we need to continue the discussion about
Yeah.
this at this meeting. We will get more information to you at the next
Okay.
meeting to
Yeah.
clarify.
And I think that's what I would reiterate, is give us the information about the MOU. But we can't, we're not in a position to put a lot of pressure on other institutions and what they do.
Why not?
She
Anyway,
just said why. So again, but we don't want to go into this more. We'll have that item on the agenda. Anyone else? Okay.
We have public comment?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Agenda item when you get there. So future agenda item, I'll narrow it down to one. Please reconsider bringing back the Albany Civics Academy regarding the recreation of your commission side. It's last one was 2017, and the Civics Academy is a great community involvement class. I know there's 20 people who get to take the class when it's offered, and I believe it was around $10 for each person. So please do what you can, Recreation Department, when you have time, please bring that back. Thank you.
Do you have any update on what's happening with Albany Civics Academy? No one's talking about it, or?
It's a citywide effort. It's not just a recreation effort.
No, that's a good point. Okay, so maybe you might want to bring that up with the city council. Yeah, because and I'll just say, no, I can't say anything.
I had one more future agenda item, which was related to the, when we get the report on the tree inventory, and it's going to go into the city's GIS database. I would request that we get from Public Works sort of a bigger picture of what that database looks like and how it relates to trees. So not just the tree part, but the things that relate to the tree parts that the city already has data on, the sidewalk parts and things like that. So that would be, months down the road.
Yeah, that's, okay. Yeah, I think we're just tight about the next meeting, but.
No, I think future agenda items, they're just for any time in the future, right?
Okay, I guess, right, it's so far in the distance based on what they said, but, okay, it's all good, yeah. So anyone else? No, okay, so then I guess we'll see you, same bat time, same bat channel, Thursday, December 8th at 7 p.m.